Okay. Thank you, Tiago. So, okay, everybody's got their G4G15 puzzle in their G4G15 backpack, so you know how this puzzle works. But in case you haven't tried it, so you mess it up by sliding the tiles around, and then you have to sort of get it back to the start again. Or if you're Sam Lloyd, then you ask people, you say, can you swap these just these two tiles? And you offer $1,000 for anybody who can do this, and it turns out this is impossible. So the $1,000 was safe. And I won't go through the sort of full explanation of why, but here's the sort of short version. There's no way to sort of move the empty tile around and back to the bottom right corner without taking an even number of steps. And there's a parity issue that makes that not work. So let's figure out a way to cheat Sam out of his money by coiling the 15 puzzle around a cylinder. And so what this does is it adds an extra connection, which adds an extra path of length 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you just have to use that path once, it's odd, and then you just solve the thing as usual, and then this lets you solve his puzzle. So here we are doing it, and I'm not very good at it, so I sped it up a lot, but here we go. So there we are, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then you can see at the bottom 13, 15, 14. So that's how to cheat Sam out of his money. Here's another way that you might think to cheat him out of his money. Well, you can't really see what's going on here, but maybe this is an easy one. So I've jammed an extra 4 tiles into the puzzle on an extra square, and I've had to put hinges in because you can only slide the tiles across when the frame is flat. And well, so once again, there's an odd length path. So around the middle here is length 5. So again, maybe you can sort of swap 14 and 15 and not mess anything else up because of that odd length path. But there's something else going on here. So notice that 11 and 10 are the same way up as each other, and 10 and 6 are the same way up, and 6 and 7 are the same way up, and 7 and 16 are the same way up, but 16 and 11 are not the same way up. They're rotated by 90 degrees with respect to each other. So if you go around that path, then tiles get rotated by 90 degrees. This is an effect called holonomy. As you move around a loop on a curved surface, you can get rotated. And so now the puzzle is not only do you need to swap 14 and 15, but you also need to do it without rotating anything, which I'll leave you to think about whether or not that's possible. But once you've started down this road of adding weird vertices with 5 squares around them, you have to go to the logical conclusion, which is that every square, every vertex has 5 squares around it. And so this adds an extra difficulty to solving the puzzle, which is that whenever you want to slide a tile from one square to another, the 2 squares have to be flat. They can't be bent up or down. That doesn't work. But that folding motion goes across the whole puzzle. So you may have to do a lot of sort of working out of bending hinges to make it actually possible to fold them flat. The other difference here is the numbering scheme. So I couldn't do, so back here, this is sort of the rows and columns of the 15 puzzle with this sort of jammed in here, but this doesn't work over here because it's just like the rows and columns don't exist anymore. So instead the numbering sort of spirals out from the center. Here's an easier to see version of this, which is on the hyperbolic plane. This is actually an interactive version, which is made by the makers of Hyperbolic. If you go to this link here down the bottom, then you can play with this yourself, although you won't get the experience of bending the hinges back and forth. But still, you get to click around and see how, whether or not you can swap. What is the equivalent of 14 and 15? I guess it's 29 and 28. Here's another puzzle that involves this holonomy effect. So this is a disassembly type puzzle. I've got this green piece here. We call it a rook because it travels along straight lines and then turns 90 degrees on a board. So this is a rook, and you can see here it's sort of back in its kind of home position up in the top. And then as it rotates around this triangle on the sphere, it comes back to the same position and it's got rotated. So it's the same holonomy effect. And the aim of the puzzle is to remove it from its sphere, which is possible if you get it in the right position. But of course, you can't rotate it in place, and there are these pegs on the sphere which interact with the arms on the rook and make it into a maze. So there are 24 positions and orientations that the rook can be in. There are 6 positions it can be in, and in each position you can be in 4 different orientations. And here's a way to sort of think about the orientations of this, or in fact any object in space. So we're going to put the object inside of a sphere of radius pi. And so in the center of the sphere, that's sort of do nothing at all, no rotations at all. And as you move along an axis out towards the boundary of the sphere, you rotate around that axis, and the angle that you rotate by is the distance that you've moved. So when you get out to the boundary of the sphere, you've rotated by pi along this axis, and if you go out to the opposite points, then you rotate by pi in the other direction, so that actually means the opposite points of this ball are connected together. And so this is a sculpture by Hans Goodman Strauss, which shows within that sort of ball, what are the paths that your rook can move along the sphere if there were no pegs at all. You're not allowed to rotate it in place, so some of the edges that you might imagine are knocked out because you're not allowed to rotate the rook in place. You have to sort of go around the loops. And so the game of making this into a puzzle is to knock out some of these possible paths by putting the pegs in. And so I wrote some computer code to do that and find interesting paths. So here are those two puzzles. Here's the same thing on a dodecahedron if you wanted to make this more complicated. This time, if you go around a pentagon, you get rotated by 60 degrees. Why is it that rotating around a pentagon rotates by 60 degrees? I'll let you think about that. Here's the sculpture for the graph of this thing. Here is Chaim and Sabeta Matsumoto and me making this thing. I don't have time to show you this whole sped up thing. Here's some versions which don't have any pegs. If you don't want to play with Holonomy, then you can look at these. Here's a version which has a genus 2 surface here, which changes the way that Holonomy works. If you rotate around a face of this instead of a face of the octahedron, you get rotated in the opposite direction because negative versus positive curvature makes a difference. Here's a version going back to the 15 puzzle. So the core of this puzzle, I call this a continental drift puzzle. The core of this is the same as for the maze on the dodecahedron. And so you slide the consonants around, and then you have to get them back into the correct positions. But of course, as you're doing so, you may rotate the consonants as well. So you not only need to get them in the correct positions, but also with the correct orientations. And here's a really evil idea here. So this is a puzzle that goes along the edges of a cube. And so there is this commercial puzzle called Rubik's Slide, where you move these cubes along the edges of a larger cube, and then you mess it up, and then you try and get it back to the start. This one doesn't involve any holonomy, right? Everything just slides around, whereas this one does, so that makes it even worse. And I should mention the puzzles I showed you were the 15 plus 4 puzzle, which is kind of workable, the Hyperbolic 29 puzzle, which I think is more of an art piece. I don't think anybody should actually solve for this. And this one is absolutely horrible as well. But I like doing art, whether or not it's actually usable as a puzzle. Thank you for your attention.